Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is the Early Access, where we take a game that's still actively being developed but is commercially available into the Steam's Early Access program or similar things like GOG's in development system. Today's game is Conan Exiles, brought to you by Funcom, which is a sandbox survival crafting game. And yes, you might be thinking, yet another one of these in Early Access. Will ever one get finished? Well, I'm here to tell you that, well, apparently not, because this one is also coming into Early Access, but it is coming into Early Access in a particularly well-developed state as far as these things go. The Early Access period is expected to be around a year, but not longer, and while the core systems in the game are mostly fleshed out, the development is mostly going to focus on improving AI and combat, which definitely needs it, and adding more content, recipes, and various other things to craft and explore and advance on in the game, while focusing on optimization and bug fixing. Pretty much par for the course for these types of games, but we're gonna have to see how the development pans out over the Early Access period. What we are going to look at is how the game looks right now over on Steam, and take a look at whether or not this game might be worth your money. First things first, Conan Exile is a sandbox survival multiplayer game, but it can be played single player or co-op mode by hosting a local server if you prefer to do so. If you want to host a permanently online server, you need to rent one externally from a provider like the one they are offering, which goes by the name of Ping Perfect. Now you can buy the server there and host it as you deem fit, or you can host your own server if you have access to a server environment that allows for that, all up to you, or you can play locally and just host it as you're playing on your system, or play with friends on a computer. All of that works absolutely fine. I've not had any issues with server or lag or latency, though obviously the official servers are expected to be stable, and playing locally has not resulted in any additional strain on my system. First things first, let's talk a little bit about mod support and settings, because those are things that are fairly cool to have in the game. Mod support is in and available from the get-go, so people that want to create mods can do so. The official servers and the various servers hosted by people, depending on the rule set, are going to depend on how the game gets played and the variety of settings that allow this. But before we do that, I'd like to take a look at all these various system options that are available. A very fleshed out audio menu is very good, no complaints at all. The video menu is also fairly decent, with a nice windowed, full screen windowed and full screen option, resolution options for most things you might find available, motion blur VSync, multiple FPS caps as well as uncapped FPS, a vertical FOV and a horizontal FOV slider that allows you to change that, really good. Even has a low laptop mode. If you're running on a very old system, it's going to tone down everything to the minimum, so you can play the game if you want to do that and you don't have a powerful beastie machine. And then it has a bunch of different other options, including AA, foliage quality, texture quality, effects quality, and so on and so forth. Obviously, AA doesn't get explained. That's a negative to the title. Maybe they'll add that in Early Access. Maybe they'll add a few more options here down the line. But so far, no complaints at all. Really decent options. Though I have to say that the texture quality Ultra doesn't appear to do much of anything. But that might just be me. Gameplay wise, you have nudity, none, partial or full depending on your preference and depending on the restrictions the server places on you based on the server you're playing on. If you want to play the game nude and have your schlong or your boobers hanging all the way out every time you go around and die naked, go right on ahead, the game allows for that. You can show nameplates depending on what you're seeing, etc, etc, etc. Pretty much par for the course with some nice added additions. The game is also localized in quite a few languages, which is also really good. Controls for the game allow you to change your mouse and controller sensitivities. The game is coming on Xbox One down the line. It's not yet available on that, but you can play the PC version as well. And key bindings are rebindable and allow you to change everything you might want. These key bindings are pretty extensive and I have no complaints about them whatsoever. Server settings are not available from the main menu. You're going to have to go into the game with a server and then either access the server settings and change them on the fly, or when you're setting up a server, change them at that point. You can do these things as you deem fit whenever you want. Now I won't be showing you that piece because it's a lot of slider bars without saying much of anything, but suffice to say you can change everything from the way XP scaling works to the way resources drop, enemy mobs, hunger and thirst, how they work, how long the day and night cycles are, stuff like that. You can change basically every parameter you might want in the game, and you can mod the game on top of that, which is pretty extensive and pretty exciting to say, at the very least, because you can make a PvE server, a PvP server, you can even play on Blitz servers that get wiped every 30 days for a very competitive, quick action environment. Overall, the game has a wide range of options and additions to the game that make me really happy. They both allow the single player person that enjoys the exploration and building and expanding their city and empire, like me, to play the game that way. They allow people that are not competitive but enjoy communal gameplay to play a PvE server, maybe build an empire, build large castles, and they allow people that enjoy a PvP experience to do just exactly that. Really solid, no complaints whatsoever. Though I'm a bit sad there's no dedicated servers permanently online with many thousands of players, the smaller servers, the few hundred players online at any time, are still very nice because you can play on multiple servers and experience the game in a variety of ways. But what does the game really do? What I'm gonna do is go ahead and skip into some gameplay segment I've pre-recorded. What I will not show you is the character creation, which still is missing some features here and there, but mostly allows you to create your character like most MMOs do, change your hairstyle, your body style, and some other parameters like your hair color and hairstyle. If you're setting up a single player, it also allows you to set up a server. We're gonna skip all of that and dive straight into the gameplay. Now the gameplay you see here is a couple hours into the game, and I've already used some admin cheats to progress further so I can explore the game as best I can to see what the different parameters are, because there is a lot of content here already available, and I'm going to share some of that with you. First things first, your character is mostly going to be running around gathering trees, gathering plant fiber, gathering rocks, iron ore, wood, trying to kill creatures to get hides and meat, to get food, getting water to contain that, building walls, towers, etc, etc, etc. It is your basic survival experience. Nothing too weird or strange about that. Now what you'll notice primarily is that the game doesn't appear very smooth. And that's the first kind of thing I want to talk about, because while the game isn't optimized in any real way, and FPS dips from anywhere between 30 and 90 FPS at any given time, it is good to know that the game doesn't crash, and even on higher settings, the game still feels very clean. I'm not experiencing a lot of jerkiness, even though the FPS is fluctuating quite wildly. On this specific instance, it's going between 30-35 when I'm looking at my built house, upwards of 60 when I'm looking at the general world and exploring around it. So that is a bit of a shame, but it is an early access title, so a lack of optimization is expected. Further, the game has a very extensive crafting system that mostly goes around you gathering base materials, refining those materials to higher end materials, and then crafting items end on end. You initially start with things from wood and stone, like a stone pickaxe or a stone sword, and you then advance into ironworking and carpentry and higher advanced things of crafting, where you create more advanced items, going all the way down the line to creating massive wells where an entire community in a walled garden sort of scenario can have a communal area with high walls protecting it from possible invaders. This is obviously something very interesting if you're playing on a higher end PvP server. Pretty cool. Now as for limitations as to how many players there are available on a server, numbers fluctuate a little bit between what is available. The official servers currently available support 70 people. The unofficial servers have upwards of 100 people. There are reports of servers being able to host up to 200 people. And if you're playing a local server, like I am doing in this gameplay footage, the maximum limit is 100 people. And while this may seem very strange if you're coming from an MMO environment where you have thousands and thousands of people playing at the same time, do keep in mind that in this kind of environment, having a smaller community, much like Neverwinter Nights Online used to have, is actually a benefit. Whether or not that appears and stays a benefit down the line when interest of the game flags a little bit and people quit the game and servers are emptying out on certain sites and people have to restart on a new server or start a new server, that is to be determined. But for now, I'm quietly optimistic regarding the way they're handling servers and multiplayer functionality. As for crafting, like I said, you start with base materials, you refine those materials, and then you refine them further by either creating things like workbenches, carpentry benches, and using wood and stone to create something like brick walls, or creating things like maybe leather or twine or whatever else you might need, and then further advancing whatever you're creating. Generally speaking, there's two main factors in regards to this game. The first one is your level. When you are playing the game, you're either gathering resources, crafting items, killing enemies, or exploring the world. During all of this, you get experience points. These experience points translate to level ups. These level ups translates into two things. One, it translates into stats, such as combat stats for melee, ranged, carrying capacity, your ability to withstand things like diseases such as food poisoning, and so on and so forth. The other part you get is the ability to unlock various recipes and crafting skills. Now these crafting skills based on everything, going from the ability to create a blacksmithy, to creating armor, weapons, wall pieces, and even beds. Everything is based around the crafting system and the recipes you unlock. Now, as you progress further into the game up to the cap of level 50, you will slowly unlock most of these things, eventually unlocking everything. But because leveling up to 50 takes quite a while, that is going to be a while before you get to the point where you are omnipotent and can do everything. Also keeping in mind that if you die, you drop all the items currently on your character on the ground. Now, if you're on a PvE server, this probably means you respawn in your safe location, go back to your corpse, loot it from whatever monster killed you, and continue on your merry way. If you're in a PvP environment, the chances of you being able to loot your own corpse are slim to none, as the enemy players that have killed you will probably take it all away. The same goes for housing and protecting your own environment. If you're on a PvE server, obviously you will not be able to get your environment killed unless enemies or monsters kill it in some fashion. But if you're on a PvP server, other players can raid your capital, can raid your buildings, and can steal your stuff. Obviously, higher end stuff such as massive vaults have much more hit points and are harder to crack and steal stuff from than those of a simple wooden and brick hut. Overall though, the gameplay is fairly simple. Go out, gather food, gather resources, refine, craft, repeat, and so on. If you enjoy that kind of gameplay, you're gonna enjoy Conan Exiles. The game has a good grasp of a balance between forcing you to consume food and drink, providing you with experience points and crafting resources to advance whatever agenda you're trying to achieve, combining exploration in an interesting world, as well as map generation and things like mob capacity. Where the game is still very lacking, in my opinion, is the AI and the advancement of the story. Now, there isn't really a story in a survival sandbox, but there are snippets here and there about lore and things that might be happening and occurring in the game. There are friendly NPCs you can talk to that might provide some help, but it's all really limited. It would have been nice to get caravans of traders or merchants where you can trade with. It would have been nice to find friendly NPCs you might be able to interact with or align yourself with, especially in the early game, or other methods to unlock gear or experience point that isn't coexistent on crafting or gathering or rock or wood. A bit of a shame that it may come down the line, though I haven't seen any indication of that sort. Other than that, one thing that really sort of bothers me is the very weak combat system. And while the developers have said that the combat system is pretty much as basic as it gets and they're going to be working a lot on improving that, for now the combat system feels very floaty, buggy, and overall not that fun. This mostly ties into the fact that the way combat works is a hit that registers on impact and has very little to do with you dodging, moving aside, or tactically maneuvering between you, enemies, or NPC monsters. But what it does allow you is to gather a couple of kills, loot some stuff, and be done with that. Get some hides, get some meat to eat, that's it. What it doesn't allow you really to do is focus on the PvP aspect, because the PvP is frankly underdeveloped and boring right now. So if you want to play this game for the PvP part, I'd honestly wait a few more months until they flesh out the combat system way further. If you want to explore the crafting, building, and overall world of Conan Exiles, and then this game is probably worth your time to pick up and play around with. Keeping in mind that it's not optimized, it's buggy, and it has a couple of glitches. These are obviously going to be fixed during the early access period, but it is an early access game and it should be treated as such. Currently in the game is a ton of content in terms of crafting and world exploration, but very little content in terms of combat and PvP experience. Clan building and clan exploration is very limited, and the world crafting, while extensive, is still very focused on a few basic elements, with some things like banners or tables being available, but nothing extravagant being much further than that. And though it is expected that lots of mods will come into play regarding this, those aren't here yet, so keep that in mind as well. Now, the last note I'd like to make regarding Conan Exiles is what the game expects going forward. Funcom has said that they're planning on spending about a year in early access with Conan Exiles. This means that during that year, they're going to have to develop a certain set of features that wrap up their game and then release it publicly. In the meantime, they're saying they're going to have regular updates. No schedule yet announced regarding this, so we can really mostly postulate and guess as to how fast Funcom is going to release these things. Now, Funcom has never been one of the bad Apple developers that throws a game out there and abandons it. Age of Conan is still going strong. The Secret World is one of my favorite MMOs, has a solid core of developers working on it, and overall, Funcom supports their products. So we're not too worried in regards to product support if we take a look at Funcom's history. But Funcom also has a history of, well, releasing games that are underdeveloped initially. And while this game is coming into early access, with a year development ahead of time still before it, the question obviously remains whether or not the game is going to be as fleshed out as people are expecting a year down the line. If you're unsure of that, simply don't buy the game and wait until later down the line. If you enjoy what you're seeing on screen now, and I have to say it is quite enjoyable and runs fairly well for an early access release, then go ahead and pick up Conan Exiles. The game is launching on January 31st for the price of €30 or your regional equivalent. It is unsure whether the game will change price down the line, but the vast majority of early access titles do not. So most likely they will stay at around €30. And while the game does certainly have issues in regards to performance and combat and physics, the crafting and building and exploration mechanics are decently well fleshed out to provide a good chunk of enjoyment for quite a few hours. And if you're playing with friends or people online in a community server, then this game is actually a tremendous amount of fun to try and figure out things, build your city, build your little stronghold, and defend it from raiders. If you're interested in Conan Exiles, you can click the link down in the description below to go ahead over to the Steam page. And if you like this video, press that like button below. If you didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And if you want to see more early access videos taking a look at these early access games, then go ahead and subscribe down below and we will deliver. And until then, I wish you a good day. And until next time, right here, GuyLogicGaming.